Okay, we are live here. It is April 2nd, 2026. And I have been looking at the moon all night. Haven't seen any sort of follow-up coverage from the event, but it was a full moon, very bright. Everyone's staring at it. It all seems to me like pageantry. Essentially, see, the obelisk has always been a symbol of sun worship, the earth god, the god of the world. Ball, shaft of obelisk is that. And I want to redo the Cult of the Obelisk documentary now, because what you're seeing is, I think, worship of the generative principle. This is a cult that runs the world, and it's primarily rooted in what you could consider to be a form of, basically a form of paganism in a way. So that generative principle worship by the idea, or symbolized by the sun, the giver of life, but symbolically through the obelisk. And the obelisks today are now burning obelisks that fly into space, the rockets. And then, of course, the focus on the moon is highly significant, especially as we get close to what? Easter. And Ishtar, it's all about goddess worship and fertility. And you don't get much more of a set of symbols related to fertility than, combining the obelisk with the moon, which is traditionally associated with the various goddesses. So you have goddess worship implied here, sort of like, and also the mission itself, Artemis. And Artemis is the twin of Apollo. So you have the Apollo Artemis thing. But the goddess Artemis would be the Greek version of the Roman Diana. And of course, archers. These are all significant. I think it might even, there's some symbolism there with the goddesses and the moon that might represent, I think, with the archery and stuff, the crescent. But anyway, the 13 months is one of the key things. Like Princess Diana fake dying by running into the 13th pole, the 13th pillar. Now, something else too. Since this mission has been talked about, and it's been a couple of years now, they have repeatedly had issues with a cracked hull or the cracked rocket. So Artemis has been damaged. And we've been talking about the symbolism of the broken arrow, which is used to describe nuclear accidents or disasters or a missing nuke. And there's been 32 broken arrow incidents since the 50s, and we're waiting for the 33rd. But I just think it's worth noting that was always synonymous with the mention of Artemis. And then we could probably add to that, these consistent references to it being cracked. Well, we'll see. I'm just looking at this thing as far as, what is its meaning? What is the ritual here? For one thing, they're not landing on the moon. So it's not even impressive. So they have all these shills out there attempting to make it like guilting us into paying attention. Like Matt Walsh is like, nobody cares about the man going to the moon again. And the history books are going to say it's a big deal and you guys don't care. Like, how does he know? Has he done a poll? Like, how does he know nobody cares? But that's his assertion. And a lot of people are just mocking the guy because he's someone who truly believes in it. And he's confronted moon landing. What do you want to call them? Because they'll say you're a hoaxer. It's like, which is a weird thing when they call you a hoaxer for calling out their hoaxes. But he's a moon landing believer. And I'm saying the moon landing is ritual pageantry. And so this is a celebration of the goddess, Ishtar. This is a celebration of the earth god. It's a symbolic ritual event. I would liken it to a ceremony. It's very pagan. And this stuff goes on all the time because the space program is the pageantry for the world religion. I call it Nasatology. So there's no reason to think that this is real in any real sense other than it's just pageantry. But a lot of people are fundamentalists about this whole cult. And this is the equivalent of a miracle. It's not a scientific achievement. Science didn't get us to the moon. Movie magic did. This is religious theater. And the documentary that I've been working on, Cult of the Obelisk, addresses this, because that's what first got me looking very critically at the space program. I didn't just wake up one day and decide to be a NASA critic, but no, I was actually looking at the various names of their missions and these associations with sun gods. And it occurred to me, that rocket, whether they mean it to be or not, seems to be syncretically, at least, correlated very perfectly with the obelisk. And then I come across the writings of William Cooper, who describes space travel as more or less fake, but also containing loads of occult symbolism, mystery Babylon. And looking at it from that perspective, especially considering the significance of the Babylon working in this wider narrative, you can see the merger of science fiction, mystery Babylon, and movie magic, and how through that we have been given the pageantry of our world religion. So if you didn't know, there's already a one world religion, and two, there's already a one world government, and this is its pageantry, and it's bigger than all the rituals in the traditional religious churches and temples. It transcends them all. This is like the meta religion that everyone is plugged into, no matter what their different beliefs are. Like, I think it's ironic that in Iran, they're burning obelisks, they're burning statues of Baal, they're burning Moloch. Yet, meanwhile, they have a space program. So you might say that you're against Baal worship, that you don't worship at the obelisk, but actually you do, because your government gave you a space program and you guys all cheer. You point and your jaws drop when the obelisk goes up into the sky. Like that ridiculous conservative guy, what's his name? And I mean, there's a lot I could say about this person just based on conjecture, but it's just another one of these conservative, I don't know what you want to call them, plants, like a Nick Fuentes, but he's more of a mainstream Republican. So he's not really like woke right. His name is Benny something. I'm going to pull this guy's picture up. Benny Johnson. So Benny Johnson goes out there to watch the rocket launch, and then he's doing the soy jack pose. Like a guy, he has his mouth wide open. Oh my God, this is crazy. He tweeted this too. So he has his mouth wide open. He's staring at the camera. Like his jaw's practically unhinged. Like his mouth is so wide open, and he's pointing at the rocket going up. Like Matt Walsh and this guy too. He's like, why aren't more people excited about this? Anyway, to further my point, I went to Benny Johnson's Twitter account and he tweeted, "The National Mall celebrated the Artemis 2 launch. Beautiful tribute to NASA." And what you have on there is on the Washington Monument, which is what? What is the Washington Monument? It's an obelisk. They projected onto it Saturn V. And what is Saturn V? Of course, Saturn is the god of the material world. This is the Saturnian matrix, the god of death. And so you can find a lot of correlations between the role of Saturn, ruler of night, and Osiris. And Osiris, of course, with the obelisk, represents the ruler of the dark, the dead sun god, that aspect of him. So interestingly, on the Washington Monument, they project Saturn V launching up into space. So what you have here is the symbolism of the old system, combined with the symbolism of the new system. So this is not unintentional. This is not coincidental. And I can go into a lot. I have covered this stuff extensively. The significance of that particular symbol, the capsule, the capstone. But the fact that they put Artemis 2 during the launch, they put the Saturn V rocket rather on the Washington Monument is very telling. It says beautiful tribute to NASA. But so they've done this before. They've done these rocket projections onto the obelisk a few times. There's even this thing at the National Mall called Catharsis at the mall. And what they do there is they burn an effigy, a Burning Man, at the base of it. And, I'll do the documentary thing again so I can reiterate what these things all mean, because it's another element to it. So we've been talking for some time about how our history is written in advance, and no conspiracy theorist wants to talk about this. They'll talk about mud flood and ancient history being manipulated by aliens and AI, but none of them will say, "Oh yeah, our history is written in advance, 100 years in advance." That's the big secret, and it's about to get out. But one of the things that we have analyzed since we've been observing this thing is how our history is told in a series of stories. You got the news cycles, and then you have these bigger stories. And one of the big stories that has carried on for many decades now is the space program. And it's a narrative written in advance, and it's performed in front of us. And this is a big part of the collective worldview. I mean, you notice how space has essentially supplanted the concept of heaven or paradise. It's our collective destination, multiplanetary, and it promises oneness. And when you go up there, you rise above your earthly disputes and your materialism that leads to the destruction of the world. Because when you go to your next destination, be it Mars or the moon, you're going to live sustainably. But anyway, this goofball was out there gawking at the flying obelisk, which is ridiculous if you really know what they're looking at. And I'm saying here that you're literally looking at sun worship. I mean, it's not only sun worship. I mean, it's an oversimplification, but you're looking at pagan pageantry, mystery Babylon, syncretically blended with science fiction. And so beyond that, though, beyond the trappings of it, we're looking at ceremony, but is there a deeper meaning to it? And I would say, yeah. I would say, yeah. Well, fundamentally, this is about replacing the traditional religions. You'll notice that there's a lot of appropriation in all the movies. Why do we have so many movies with a blatant Gnostic subtext? Why do we have so many movies where they have the various actors who are consistently Christified, where the characters like Vanilla Sky, David Ames, 33-year-old, etc., dies, reborn, Sophia resurrects him. That's a Gnostic reference. But why are they doing this? Well, the reason why they're appropriating this iconography and symbolism is because they're creating a new universal religion. I mean, we're already part of it. Now, as far as the old religions, are they phasing them out? I don't think that's the case. See, I think they want that dichotomy between traditional religions and the New Age religion. And the New Age religion isn't openly witchcraft and paganism or anything like that. It's actually NASA. It's actually the space program. It's actually space as religion. It's the modern scientific paradigm, but it has the exoteric and the esoteric. And so at the esoteric side, you're seeing this stuff. Like, what's with this veneration of these particular symbols? And I'm saying it's because they are replacing all the old stuff. This is a new universal religion. All right, let's see who's joined in the chat here. The HBIC, Copaesthetic, Duet Celeste, The Grievance, Envious Tossing, Tuna X says, how does anyone get to space without Stanley Kubrick? I got into like a 5-day argument on Twitter with some fool who was saying, there's no way they could have faked the moon landing in 1969. The special effects weren't there. It's like, what are you talking about? Stanley Kubrick was already producing stuff better than what NASA put out. And even today, it really goes without saying that the science fiction genre, the movies, for decades have eclipsed NASA's presentations. And to me, that's been one of the glaring contradictions that people refuse to notice, is that why is it that the movies about space look realer than the actual footage? Well, there's a reason why. And I said for some time that the limiting factor as to how far we get into space isn't technology. No, it's special effects. And I think now they're confident enough that they could fool the world with the moon base, but they have to be sure that their sets, that their technology, whatever, that it's going to have lasting power, because rear screen projection doesn't do it anymore. Green screens and bungee cords and hairspray aren't doing it anymore, at least not for us. But it's not competitive. It's going to stand out to normies. But you do have its defenders. You do have these fight the flat earths, and who are these other ones? McToon, and they see green screen and bungee cords and hairspray and goofy effects, and their jaws drop. They literally believe in it. They become like children at a magic show. It's like, you guys are like children. But the reason for this thing, the reason for any psyop, the reason for ceremony in general, it's about synchronizing people along this historical event, these unfolding of miracles in a sequence leading us into heaven. But it's about synchronizing us. We're all part of a religious paradigm. We're all part of a process. DeWitt says, even if you're MSM and you take everything at face value, it's quite underwhelming considering all the tax dollars NASA's been receiving over the decades. Well, and I think that NASA's goal has never been necessarily about conquering space, like outer space. It's always been about conquering inner space. It's always been about mind control in the sense of world view. And that's what history gives us. It gives us a world view. That's why they manufacture history, because we're put into a paradigm, a Truman Show. And the worldview that we have, this modern scientific paradigm, has these miracles that keep us synchronized. But the organization itself, yeah, its job isn't to take you to some distant place. It's to get you to internalize this model. How you see yourself, the world, the universe, and our future, our destiny. They serve as a form of like a priesthood in a way. I would also argue that NASA is an Egyptian mystery school. It's very Masonic. I mean, okay, if you know like Masonry, for example, you have like the exo and the esoteric, which their teachings are about. So it's not about building cathedrals. It's not really about working with stone. It's just allegory. So the square and compass. Yeah, you can use the square to measure the earth, the compass to measure the celestial area, realm. Build your temples, align them with the sun. But you could also look at the square as a symbol of the material world, and the compass, the circle, the symbol of the spirit encased in matter. So there's like the allegorical aspect. And I don't think it's coincidental that to exit the earth, you have to go Mach 33. That's the escape velocity. Well, Mach 33 to escape the material plane sounds a lot like, I don't know, the fire serpent, the 33 vertebrae, the ascension of consciousness from the material to the celestial. So going from Earth to space is really symbolic of the Earth chakra to third eye. It's like about essentially higher consciousness. But that's the esoteric aspect of it. I don't know if all the astronauts are initiated into it at its deep level, or if it's just like you got the clown show where they're hanging from cords. Like that one guy hanging upside down was named Butch. One of the two that were stuck on the capsule, and his forehead had this vein on it. It's just like his face was red like a tomato. I'm like, why is this guy tomato red? And why is that forehead vein about to burst? And it's because he was upside down on Earth, not in space. Of course, the believer said that we were crazy. And they said there is no redness to his face. There is no vein. Like they literally deny their own senses, their own perceptions, when their perceptions contradict the screen. That shows you how most people are. They have capitulated. They have outsourced quite a lot of their worldview to the screen, but they have recognized its primacy over their own perceptions. Like, well, if it's not on the screen, it's not real. If it's on the screen, it's real. That's their starting point. It's pretty sad. So, of course, we went to the moon. And they always say that we went to the moon, guys. It's like, we didn't go to the moon. We didn't win the Super Bowl. We sat on our couches and stared at the TV. They try to make it into a collective achievement, like Americans, like, oh, we did that. It's like, no, you effing didn't. It's like, it's the greatest achievement of all mankind, and you're going to claim credit for it. Oh, did we build the ISS? How come the greatest work of architecture in human history, the space station, the greatest collaboration between all these various nations, this edifice, this orbiting cathedral, why is there no video? Show me the video of where they made the space station. Oh, there isn't one. They forgot. Joe from Connecticut says, as he said before, the New World Order is the old world order making changes. Yeah, exactly. Critterfest says NASA's a complete pathetic joke. Well, it is to us because we're insiders. It's not a joke to normies. It's their religion. NASAtologists. And that's what I call them. And like, look, give credit where it's due. NASAtology, it's another space religion like Scientology, but they have better special effects. Although Scientology has the better actors. That's why I was so much looking forward to Tom Cruise going to space. They say it's not going to happen. I have my doubts. I think it's going to happen. I think there's a story building of Tom Cruise overcoming red tape put there by Donald Trump. We'll see. Till says, Tim, is the astrological stage play going to wrap up soon? The audience is gathering tomatoes. No, it's never going to end. It's never going to end. It's the never-ending story. They have total control. I mean, unless somebody throws a big wrench into the system and creates some kind of societal rift or schism, like a mass apostasy, short of that, this does not end. In fact, it's just beginning. 12/21, 2020, the Great Conjunction, Jupiter, Saturn, winter solstice. Essentially, that was year zero. Welcome to this is the Aeon of Horus, associated with Mars, which is why Mars has always been a big topic. Why Mars? Well, because the nature of society on Mars is the utopian blueprint for how we're going to live here on Earth. So we're going to live on Earth as they do on Mars. And this has been built into the New Age paradigm, but they've introduced it with science fiction. There's a book from 1906 called Red Star, written by these, because the Russian rocket pioneers were all about space communism, and they said, well, we can show that communism works perfectly on Mars, because that's what Red Star is about, and then we can just basically export it back to Earth. Let's Go says, I didn't connect to the launch. It's April Fool's Day. How appropriate. Hey, thank you, Multi-Zero, for feeding the crack Gwyn. If you don't know what the crack Gwyn is, you'll hear the sound effects very soon. Once I'm back in the office space, we'll have the screen where the Kraken shows up. The crack Gwyn. So the crack Gwyn is what happens. See, you know what they call a flock of penguins when they're on the water? A raft. So here we are, a raft floating on the sea of irrelevance. But when we reach critical raft, when we have the numbers, then we invade the mainland. That's the crack Gwyn. We are assembling right now. That's why the office space is the next step here, because we need the 24/7 stream. We need the fully functional phone system for human intel and dialogue and debate. And we also need to have our publishing wing operational. We have many people with press passes. They need to be activated. And the one thing we were lacking is no longer lacking. I mean, I really emphasize this over everything else in my life because we need to lay down the intellectual groundwork for this third branch of media. And that's done. Like, we have something to stand on. So now we just have to blow it up. And that's the fun part. And for that, we need the office space. And so I went, I tried a few different things to attempt to make it happen. But what I settled on was a night shift. In fact, that's the reason why I'm here right now, is I just got off work. And this particular gig that I have is going to make it very easy to make all of our plans operational. That and all of your support, especially the members here, it's been instrumental in keeping this thing going, keeping fuel in the tank. Now what we need is accelerant. Like if you really want to see the world stage construct, the internalized Truman Show, the dominant religion of the world that people don't know is a religion, if you want to see it shaken, this is essentially what we're talking about here. We're talking about a marketplace disruption, but it's bigger. I mean, that's the way of describing it, the arena of ideas, but it's bigger than that. Because media, it turns out, is a branch of government. Bread and circuses is pretty much how they control minds. And there have not been any significant disruptions or challenges to the status quo dominant paradigm as laid out for us day by day by the worldview monopolists. Alternative media is a fraud. It's a hoax. And this is just fair warning. If you're still a bitter clinger to any alt media guardrails or orthodoxies, you're part of the deception. In other words, you're working for the enemy. And that's not going to be looked upon very kindly, if you ask me, as things move forward. I have a few predictions about how this will go, but I'm not going to lead with those. It's like, let them underestimate us until it's too late. Let them underestimate this and your intelligence and the points that we're making as long as they possibly can. Let them live in denial. Because when the time comes, the crack wind concept, critical mass, when the avalanche hits, the more defenseless they are, the better it will be for this. Because what we're establishing here is something permanent, something with no ceiling, something scalable, something leaderless, asymmetrical, unstoppable. And these aren't exaggerations. If you look at how this thing has been managed, and we've been just our own empirical research, we've been documenting and noticing that, yeah, we live in a construct and there have been no effective challenges against it, because all the challenges that are presented to us from big platforms and popular authors and content creators always operate within the system. They don't challenge it. Even people like David Icke, like, oh, this guy's fringe. He believes in, reptilians and we're in a simulation. Yeah, well, he's a world stage friendly anti-establishment voice. He has not left the matrix. He has not gone off the grid. Does he know this? Not necessarily. What makes this system so powerful is its compartmentalization and the way it weaponizes ignorance. And I would argue that because you have two primary groups of people. You have the programmed, which is the default. It was all of us. Nobody comes out of here. No one begins off world stage. Everyone goes through the programming to some level. Not watching news doesn't mean you're deprogrammed. It just means you're under misinformed. Someone had said, are Amish people off world stage? No. In order to go off world stage to exit their Truman Show, it does require some active and conscious decision making and rejections of things. This is not a passive thing. You can't just accidentally find your way to the off world stage perspective. But so we're not talking here about simply calling things fake. We're talking about systemic fakery. But the various perspectives you get from these popular channels, they don't challenge the fundamental reality of what's presented before us on TV. They just argue over who did it. So, and just for example, David Icke still lives in the world where thousands of people died on 9/11. Well, we can demonstrate the patterns, the templates, the predictive, the concurrent programming, and what its implications are, and why there's no reason to believe anybody died. But if you're going to cling to the idea that somebody died, I would ask, well, what are your reasons? Because there are things that people accept at face value passively over time that accumulate that dramatically alter their worldview. So, what is fake history? Well, fake history is just a combination of what really happened plus the simulated events that people react to and that get cataloged in our history. So if you're still living in that world predicated on all these fake events being real, you're still in the simulation. I'm going to make this very easy for people to conceptualize using whiteboards as I begin to promote the book. But there are people who are close enough to immediately grasp the significance of this point. It's easy to overlook it. It's easy to overlook it. But a lot of people who are cognizant of media fakery and how it's possible, and they notice the predictive programming, ignore it or don't understand it. A lot of others are still caught up in the world media, as in they're part of media. It's how they make their living. And so they pander to the existing audiences. So you have some people who are pretty smart. They figure out things are faked, but they're still pandering to truthers. And I'm saying truthers are technically the enemy here. Because if you can look at the mainstreamers as defending the world stage and essentially helping to implement this fake history, well, the alt media is actually a part of it because it's a duopoly. It's a triangulation process where you have the left versus right to get the engagement to make the events real. If they just broadcasted these events and published them in textbooks without any interaction, it wouldn't work. They have to make these things real. And they make these real through what they call alternate reality games, the ARGs. And a good example is Epstein. Epstein's real because they put the documents out there for everybody to look through so you can participate. Of course, there's no evidence. And if you look at the state of Trutherville, there are people who think that this guy in Florida named Pete who looked like Jeffrey Epstein from a profile and went viral as a result. Well, now he's a content creator and he's getting interviewed all over the place because of his resemblance to Jeffrey Epstein. So he's kind of a celebrity now. Imagine being pointed out for having such a close resemblance to the world's most notorious child abuser and human trafficker, this villain of epic proportions, and that becomes a positive because it's all about attention. So this guy's now a celebrity. He's an e-celeb. And there are people out there, a lot of truthers are saying, oh no, this is actually the real Jeffrey Epstein. They have to tell you. It's a revelation of the method. And I'm looking at this guy. He doesn't even look like Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, in a very vague way, I feel like it's almost racist to say, because it's like, it's just another, profile of a, white guy with white hair. They all kind of look the same. They don't look the same. In a very generic way, I guess. And before that, people are being duped by AI versions of the guy. But my point of it is, truthers today are no closer to the truth than they've ever been. They're just in a weirder version of the mainstream. That's all. It's not like they're skeptics. It's not like they're vetting their claims. They're just like, oh, I believe this, I believe this, I believe this, because it's from non-establishment sources. But I don't believe anything establishment. So it's not even a intellectually honest approach. It's actually more like religiosity and fundamentalism and fanaticism. That's why I'm saying truthers are the enemy. If the world stage and the worldview and our fake history is the religion, if you look at it as its real purpose, it's essentially establishing a religion. Now, the religion doesn't look very much like traditional religions unless you know what you're looking at. But why would we treat the radicals and the extremists in such a religion as people that we should follow or listen to or pander to? So what I'm saying here is that the world stage concept is being upheld by the mainstream and the alternative equally. They're equally culpable. And if you're still defending alt media territory right now, today in 2026, you're on the wrong side of the screen. And I don't know if it's worth it. Not that I expect people to change because of what I say, but a lot of them have this false sense of security that I can be ignored, we can be ignored, the truth doesn't really matter, everything's reality fluid. No, that's not the case. And we're here to accuse the mainstream of participating in mass deception and mind war. Well, guess what? Alternative media is just as culpable. So you think we're not going to address this? And whereas we can't reach the mainstreamers, they're insulated, they don't talk to us, but we can reach the alternative people. Anybody at the channel of substantial size can be reached, publicly called out. The naming and shaming will have to begin. But I don't mean it in that sense of being antagonistic, but I do mean that there will have to be accountability. Like, if you're going to continue to promote certain beliefs and this is your flimsy evidence, then what? What kind of concessions are you going to make? And at a minimum, I would expect people to say, well, I don't know it to be true. I just believe it. Which makes my point. Believers. And what we engage in here, you could describe as, sure, media deconstructionism, but what are we compared to the mainstream believers? Well, we're non-believers. I would use the term media gnostics, lowercase g. Let me go through your comments. A few of them have come through here since I had to leave work early because I had too much overtime. And then they made me stay out to lunch for an extra 30 minutes because of overtime. So I'm thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't be trying to get overtime and I should focus on staying within due hours and doing the bare minimum there and just focusing on this. I thought it was just going to be like that, but no. And then tonight was really weird because the trucks that bring the stuff that I'm supposed to put on the shelves didn't actually arrive until later in the shift. And so I just kind of let go. But I'm off until Monday. That's how much I've been overworking, which I'm not trying to take lots of days off, but regardless, it's going to be productive. There's a few projects I want to close up here. Let's see, my Les Lawlier says, it would make sense that history is written 100 years in advance because why else would they still be using rockets now? Because that's the limit of what Jules Verne could conceive. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea takes place at the Pole of Inaccessibility, the same place where NASA drops its spent satellites, and the same place where, in the Lovecraftian mythos, the ancient ones, the old gods, landed there, and they have a city at the bottom of the ocean. Again, same place, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, same place where the old satellites go. But yeah, what I'm saying is our history is indeed written 100 years in advance. And the effect of this is it has merged real with fake in the minds of the people who are living in this world stage paradigm. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we're in a hyper reality. So it's real plus fake stuff. And I think the best way of describing it would be to reference Frank Herbert Dune Messiah quote. I think he said about people, about the masses. They're not mad. They're trained to believe because belief can be manipulated. Knowledge is dangerous. So here we are, knowers, media gnostics, and we're looking at the believers who are trained. When I say that the government gave everybody mind aids, that's what I'm talking about. It destroyed their mental immune systems so they would be susceptible to government mind viruses. Mission accomplished. Sounds dismal, but the good news is there's a cure. It's not terminal. You can get a cure from AIDS. Just listen to IPR. Till said, last night Trump said they defeated Iran in 32 days. People are catching on to the 33 even blue pillars. Yeah, and let me add to that. So we're talking about history being written in advance. And the insiders would know when something is or isn't real. How? Symbolism. How do we know? Oftentimes symbolism gives it away. See, you can't forget the fact that you're an insider to this stuff. more so than a lot of the programmers. Because if the majority are programmed by default, and you have the programmers, are the programmers deprogrammed? I would say no. I was getting to this earlier, that the programmers are only deprogrammed with regard to their specific subset within the psychological operations. So we have the PSYOP entertainment complex that has all the fake events in history, and it's very compartmentalized. We, on the other hand, are not programmed anymore because we have separated real from fake, the fake timeline from the real thing, not just today, and recognizing the fakery being introduced every day, but also recognizing the implications for history. So we are not subject to the compartmentalization. We have a decompartmentalized view as being deprogrammed. We're seeing the program separated from what's real, but we're not being let in on stuff because we're not serving the system. So I would suggest that IPS think tank members are more in the know than the average run-of-the-mill programmers. Now, I can't say the same for the meta scripters, the big names, which we will be getting to. We've been doing a lot of work on this great deconstruction, which is what I call it. And what we're doing is we're demonstrating just through receipts and mind maps that our history has been manipulated. I mean, it's demonstrable. Our history has been significantly manipulated with fake events that do not get corrected. What's up, Ribo Nation? Does Artemis 2 encounter ETs on Easter to fulfill Chris Bledsoe's prophecy delivered to him from the lady? You know, I was going to go watch that movie today, Hail Mary, because again, when you look at syncretism, you're talking about merging of archetypes. So like Mary and Isis, you know, people may not want to hear this, just like they don't want to hear Osiris compared to Jesus. So they don't want to hear about these things because they want to think that there's no way that any major world religion could be totally constructed. To which I always point out Serapis, one of the greatest examples of a state-created god merging the gods of multiple regions to merge their people under a singular worldview. So I think Hail Mary, and also the ISS. I think the Isis is the goddess of the night sky, and the ISS, I think symbolically, is something of a temple to Isis. And I get into this in my Cult of the Obelisk documentary, but none of these things are coincidental. So the timing of Easter, the full moon, the Artemis launch, and the release of the movie Hail Mary is not unintentionally coincidental. Like, you got these people say, "Oh, you guys are just looking at coincidences." Well, yeah, we are. Like, thank you for that insight. What we're looking at here are intentional coincidences. There's a big difference. They're not just coincidences. Joined by X322 times 3. John Francis. Tracy Banton says, can't wait to see the fake pictures from the dark side of the moon. Kind of a misnomer. The dark side. It's just the side we can't see. I think it's really weird though. Because I don't know. But I mean, the dark side, the side we don't see, but it's always getting the sun. Okay, I have problems with the moon. The back side doesn't have the same type of impact craters as this side. And why does our side have impact craters? Wouldn't the Earth have blocked those rocks? That's one problem I have. I also, and maybe I need to talk to AI about this, but isn't there a contradiction between tidally locked and synchronous orbit, where the moon is going through a 27-day rotation on its axis, but we always see the same face? And they'll say, oh, it's our synchronous orbit, but it's also tidally locked. So how does that actually work? I'm still intrigued by the idea put forth by Vibes of Cosmos, Sturgio Studios 10, that the moon contains what appears to be some kind of projection, or is a projection, or in some way has a reflection of the land masses. That the craters aren't actually from impacting rocks, but are in fact the dark spots, like a negative of what we're on. And that whole premise is either pareidolia or 100% true. But it's like, to say it's merely some kind of hallucination is to ignore the fact that there's a lot of close matches and hits that too many to ignore. But if true, if that is the case, that the moon isn't actually what we are told, and it does contain some type of a map, if true, then our Earth globe only contains about a quarter of the land masses that are accessible. Anonymous says the sheep will fall for everything they see on TV. Oh yeah, the sheep have blind faith in media. They live with their face pressed up against the screens, and they actually treat the screen as a sensory apparatus. And that's by design. It's faith. Like, so you like people in church believe everything they read in their books. They just believe it. Oh, it's in the book, it's true. It's on TV, it's true. You see how that works? The News Testament is the New Testament. Mila says, how did the one world religion adherents explain the Indian moon landing? That was an appalling fake. Yeah, I have to point this out. They show you an animation that goes along with the real thing, since they don't have a cameraman on the moon. So yes, India's animation was very crappy, but that wasn't meant to be the real thing. For some reason, a lot of people have thought that was an attempt to show us the real thing. Duet Celeste responds, in my experience with people with university degrees, the faker it looks, the more impossible, the more they believe it. I can attest to this myself, that there's this default belief, because I remember specifically, I had some roommates at one point. There was a group of us living in a house, and there was a big screen, and the person there, he did computer repairs and was mining Bitcoin. And I didn't care about any of that stuff. But he and his girlfriend would sit around smoking a bong and watching the ISS footage. And I remember looking at it thinking, why does it look like computer graphics? That's as deep as I went. I said, it looks like computer graphics. But in my mind, I just reconciled it. I said, oh, I guess it's from space. I guess the space footage, for some reason, like, I didn't even have a good reason, but I gave it a pass. It didn't actually, it didn't, it didn't cause me to go any deeper than that. It was like, the power of the lie is so good that rather than trusting my perceptions, I just said, well, it's on TV. It's got to be real. It has to have been vetted. The idea that it could have been faked was not even on my radar, not even a possibility or a consideration. In fact, I tended to believe in space, and I kind of got caught up in the idea of probably gods of Eden, that aliens are, if they're real, it's just a way of describing the gods who have always been here, and that space is probably where they've come from. Maybe like David Icke said, from the Sirius star system. But the thing is, you're talking about echo chambers. So when you say people with university degrees, yeah, doesn't matter how smart you are, how educated you are. When it comes to media events, you're largely outsourcing your intel to a third party. And if you trust it, you have faith in it, you can be lied to. We're just talking about lies. It's actually fundamentally simple. So it's not for a lack of intelligence, because people are highly intelligent and experts in their own fields, but they fall for this because this is a collective blind spot by design. Yeah, that guy's name, Palm Beach Pete. Palm Beach Pete sees himself as an e-celebrity now because he looks like Jeffrey Epstein. Like, honestly, if I was him, I would have dyed my hair. Like, I don't want that association. And now he's flying around on a private jet because he's got so much money. Think about that. People are donating money to a guy who's famous for looking like Jeffrey Epstein. I'm waiting for Alex Jones to get him on the show and get his autograph. Because if you think about it, Epstein's kind of a star in their alternate reality game. Lean Dion says alleged emails are definitely not evidence of anything. Seems like a troll. Right. In their emails, like they're using this obvious code and they're incriminating themselves, where every single email could be subpoenaed by a judge with one simple motion filed by one party. Like this stuff isn't even private if you think about it. It's remarkably easy. And not only that, but they're considered to be, pretty hard evidence if you have the headers. So the idea that they would all be self-incriminating like that is just kind of ridiculous. And that's the nature of it, though, because we're talking about the manufactured worldview that has fake events, but it also has fake people. And so the fake people actually have to have their lines. They have to have communications. They have to leave trails. So what I'm thinking is this QAnon script, Pizzagate script, Jeffrey Epstein script, it's not new. In fact, there's plenty of predictive programming. In fact, there's recently this book that I was looking at where it had this author whose name was Epstein, and it had a character who was basically named Trump, and it was like an authoritarian deporting people from. It's like a World War II novel, but anyway, this has the signature aspects of a psyop, and so it just means that these people would be kind of like spies. What are spies? You get embedded somewhere, you have a fake backstory. So essentially, they're plants, and they're interacting with each other. So like, oh, this month, this is your script. We need you guys to film this video and exchange these text messages because these will be used later. And if you look back at the text message exchanges between Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk, you can see examples of this where Charlie Kirk was constantly talking about how they were going to take him out and she was going to have to defend him. He had prophecies in his emails. Well, that's because he's a scripted character. But emails are not evidence any more than photos are evidence or videos evidence. But here's why it works. It's sort of like a reverse psychology. Truthers don't believe anything from the news. Truthers believe anything leaked by the government. They believe anything they find on their own on the ground. We call it chicken feed. Because they see themselves as too smart to be spoon fed. But then they get the same chicken feed when it's on the ground. And they think since I discovered it, it's trustworthy. Oh, you can't trust the government, but you can trust leaked government documents. Right. Like they wouldn't intentionally plant stuff there because they know that you'll believe anything you find on the ground. King Ravana says, Tamerlan and Dzhokhar Sharnev's uncle Ruslan told us, quote, they're losers. He may not have been in on the gig. We'll have to analyze these characters as well. Joker, the Boston bombing Joker character, is Rolling Stones cover. And there was a recent, I guess, ISIS attacker or somebody who was sympathetic to ISIS who looked kind of like that guy. Like you'll see what they do with some of these terrorists. They create these like icons, like Luigi Mangione, Dzhokhar Sarnev. They have a lot in common, where they're presented to their target demographic in such a way to make them attractive, and they're fighting against the system. Like Luigi Mangione has the Mangionettes. Basically, there's lines of women just going to the jail. And that is a thing. I did kind of know about this, but it's side topic. I've observed a few things where, yeah, I mean, we hear about men having OnlyFans. Well, women have guys in jail. They like write them letters and they send them stuff, and they date them when they get out. It's really weird and creepy, but it's no different. But anyway, they wouldn't have access to Luigi like that if they didn't want to make this spectacle, I think. Like, I've been wondering, why doesn't Tyler Robinson have any groupies? Didn't he take out a more significant target? Like, wasn't Charlie Kirk a bigger score than what's his name from the insurance company? No groupies, no packs of furries, nothing. His only groupie is Candace Owens. All right, thank you everyone again for supporting the IPS think tank. We are moving into a very important phase, and I had a calendar set up at the beginning of the year, and I didn't want to miss any of these target dates, and I don't think we're going to have to. I'm planning on doing some book promotion starting off later this month. There's a chance I might even do some out of state, but I'm going to do some local stuff first. There's a few reasons for this, but primarily it's that there needs to be content created around the handbook for the recently deprogrammed that includes infographics and explanations of the main concepts. And the clearer it is, not only is it more accessible to those who have already self-deprogrammed to a large degree, but then it'll be approachable by those who wish to confront it, to tear it down. It's like, debunk this, prove us wrong, change our minds, because that's when things get interesting, because the facts are on our side. We have a better model. Truthers have an outdated methodology for understanding media, and I pointed this out for a long time. This is a necessary operating system upgrade. If you're not auto hoaxing the MSM, you're way behind. And you'll notice nobody in alt media does this as a matter of practice. It's just occasionally. And I noticed that within Trutherville, they get mad at those of us who focus exclusively on fakery. I've had one say, "You emphasize the fakery too much. It's going to get real. What are you going to do when the National Guard puts their boot on your face?" I'm like, nothing's going to happen. Like, what about World War III? What about Civil War? What about they're always like Chicken Little, the boy cried wolf, the sky is falling. They're always super agitated because they're woke. I have to say, there's something we need to discuss here regarding critical consciousness, because wokeism holds the key to this whole thing. So the idea of critical consciousness is that one achieves awareness of the central theme where, oh, look, there's an oppressed class and the oppressors. That's what climate justice is. The Western, the capitalist countries, the polluters are destroying the earth and therefore oppressing the poor who are more adversely affected by climate chaos. The idea of communism is about recognizing the class society and the inherent oppression. So when you see that, you're awake to it. When you see systemic racism, you're awake to it. When you see ICE or you see Derek Chauvin, these things wake you up to the fact that you have this oppressor and the situation, and most people are asleep. So compared to everybody else, you're awake. So that's kind of the idea with Red Pill, is like, oh, we're awake. Alex Jones woke me up. What did he wake you up to? That we're being oppressed by the Rothschilds and the chemtrails and the reptoids. So whenever you give somebody a worldview that tells them that everybody's asleep but you woke up to this big thing. That's what's referred to as critical consciousness. Well, these are both false. Antifa's critical consciousness is based on historical lies, fake events, fake history. Red pill truthers, their wokeism is also fake, based on lies, government manufactured counterculture conspiracy theories. The woke right, with their belief in the whites being oppressed by Jews and white genocide, yeah, that's based on lies. So the critical consciousness thing has been hijacked. So anybody who feels like there's something fundamentally wrong is directed into one of two different scenarios that explain, well, several scenarios where they fall on the two sides, left or right, that explain the state of the world and what you've woken up to. But these are both false, is what I'm saying. Now, what we're positing here is that no, there actually is a real valid critical consciousness, but it comes from media deconstruction, from recognizing that there is a universal, I mean, you could use the word oppressor if you want. There's a universal mind war. That's a perpetual state of psychological warfare against every single human being. So you could say that being aware of that is more of a legitimate woke than being aware that Bill Gates is your oppressor or whiteness is your oppressor, things that are based on manufactured history. Because we're not talking about oppressors here in the that they've given us to identify as such. No, we're actually pointing at the triangulator itself. This is beyond left, right. Going through your comments. Oh, I got a good one here. Strangest claim to fame, says Lean Dion, regarding, yeah, the Pete guy. But listen to this. Lean Dion says, didn't these tech bros have encryption on Gmail? Yeah, exactly. These guys could have been using Telegram. Like, where do people who, like e-fencers, you steal stuff, you sell it online drug dealers, human traffickers, do they all use Gmail? And that's probably code as well. Because what is a Gmail? Well, there is a fraternity, a group for males that have a big G as their logo. The Gmails are the Masons. And what is the Gmail logo? Oh, it's the Masonic apron. Look at the Masonic apron, which is an apron they wear around their waist, and it looks like an envelope. And it has a folding top, actually. And it's stylized to represent the aprons worn by the Egyptian pyramid builders, the pyramid workers. So now you have the Masonic apron with a G on it, and it says Gmail. So yeah, to me, I think it's just code. And isn't the logo for Chrome, doesn't it have a built-in 666? DeWitt Celeste says there are YouTube doctors talking about the other doctors who are in the files. Yeah, a bunch of crisis actors. And look how effective this has been. And when we talk about things being staged, for our stage history, there has to be utility. Like, what's the point? Epstein has to exist for the same reason Derek Chauvin has to exist, for the same reason ICE has to exist. They need to have tangible evidence of oppression for each side, and each side's oppressor has to be associated with the other side. So, for example, the existence of Jeffrey Epstein basically says, hey, woke right, you're correct. Israel controls the world. You see, it vindicates them. But you'll notice the way that it's talked about on the left, they always claim that it's the KGB. It's like, who's controlling Trump? Is it China, the KGB, or the Mossad? It depends on where you are in the political spectrum. It's very subjective. If you're way far woke left, oh, he's obviously controlled by Russia. If you're more moderate left, he's controlled by China. If you're on the woke right, he's controlled by the Mossad. King Nirvana says, I ordered my hat on 324. Oh, nice. I'm placing a couple orders today. And in fact, I'm sending one out to John the Beggar. He's a regular caller inner over there at Fakeologist. And by the way, Fakeologist, I think he's taking the day off. Lean Dion says they're playing out a fuel crisis script and it's having real effects price-wise, which is only escalating. Yeah, that's something else to consider too. As we get into this this conflict between off-world stage and on-world stage, there are different approaches because some people don't care. Most of the people I deal with every day, this is so far removed from their experience. They literally don't care. This is not relevant to their interests. But if you want to incite some level of anger or resentment, you could point out that the insiders on this world stage, the insiders to the system who have the playbook as far as what's coming in the future, yeah, they have some unfair advantages. Insider trading. If you don't think that the PSYOP entertainment complex is making money off of our overreactions, our reactivity, then you're kind of missing not what the point is, but what one of the incentives is to be a part of it. Imagine what you could do if you knew the future, like Biff Tannen, Donald Trump in Back to the Future, Donald Trump's predictive programming parallel. Biff Tannen found a sports almanac and let him know who was going to win in the future on these horse races, and he was able to make himself rich. And that's pretty much how it works. I mean, look, what we're talking about here is evidence. This isn't speculation. For example, Donald Trump winning wasn't the result of his stellar performances at the debates and making everyone else look bad. No, he was preordained. He was going to win regardless. And the evidence for this is simply the predictive programming. And the predictive programming is easy to dismiss by people who have a very shallow take on it. But what we have been doing is we've been documenting the common denominators between predictive programming elements in movies related to specific characters on the world stage and show how over the many years they have repeated elements. Lean Diaz says the wealth divide is becoming a complete extremity. It's a real, yeah. Now, so we say wealth divide, but there's also something else to consider, and it's standard of living. Is there a flattening out? Is there a flattening out effect? And I don't mean to sound overly optimistic, but I've been working, for myself, which means usually losing money because it's small business. And so I've been more or less working nonstop without a lot of material benefit as far as, the operation's going, but I kind of put myself in a very weird, very weak position financially. So I go back to work and I'm making more than twice as much stocking groceries than I did when I was picking up bodies for the county morgue just a few years ago. So I hear people complain about, the money situation, the economy and all this, the job market. But it was very easy for me to walk into a job where I'm making more money than I've ever made before, and it doesn't even feel like work. Like I don't even consider it work. What I'm doing here is work. This requires effort. This requires investment, and what I do over there is essentially a little bit of exercise. My point of it is, I don't know for sure, but it just seems like the standard of living thing might be a bigger factor than the actual, numbers. Like, does Elon Musk have a significantly higher quality of life than any of us? What? Access to what? Better drugs? Um, Private flights? Like, what's actually better there? And looking at some of these people who are very wealthy, okay, so they're insulated, they have their own little in-group stuff, but what is it that's better? Like when it comes to information access or cultural exchanges, it just seems like a lot of stuff has been leveled. There's been a massive leveling of the playing field. And the idea of like oppressor and oppressed, like people say, like when Occupy Wall Street came out. They said, oh, the 1% is oppressing the 99%, and the 1% needs to just, share their wealth. And there are these people saying, well, if you took all the money from the richest 1% and spread it out, it would only go this far. But when you look at it, you could say, well, Americans are all the 1% compared, if you compare it to other places. So there's a lot of pessimism that's introduced into the culture as well. Portal says stuff's expensive on purpose. I don't think so. I think it's mostly market forces and competition. I mean, think about it. You can't say that they're raising prices on purpose. Not really, because somebody would just lower their price. It's more like competition is what drives it down. If something does go up, it's usually something the state controls. It's not free market. But no, I don't think that the businesses have an incentive to make things more expensive necessarily. That's the Marxist idea, is that it's always exploitation, and I don't know if that's the case. I mean, look at the dollar stores and the quality of the products compared to what they were 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 50 years ago. And I'm just thinking, with the smartphone and AI, there's so much of a leveling that again, I don't mean to sound optimistic, but I don't feel all that oppressed. I mean, if someone like me can just go take some menial job and make enough money to make a living, then maybe it's not that bad. But I'm not trying to say that it's not hard on everyone else. I just don't feel like it's taking any effort. Like, this takes effort. Portal says entrepreneurship is the key to financial freedom. I wouldn't recommend it. The entire time I've been an entrepreneur, I've been broke. Or when I've had money, I've reinvested it. It's never been lucrative, to be honest. And all of my non-entrepreneurial family and friends are doing much better financially. Houses, families, cars. And here I am, like, barely scraping by. But that's because I've chosen this. But I think if I wanted to just focus on money, I could. That's what I was doing before IPS. I was actually mostly doing fulfillment by Amazon, Kindle books, local art sales. I am starting a junk hauling business because it's low overhead. I mean, I already have one, but I had an idea for marketing. So there's a lot of competition for junk hauling. And so I see this sign today under a bridge. It says Better Call Hall. It's a riff off of Better Call Saul. But anyway, the guy from Better Call Saul, the guy from Breaking Bad, the attorney, that actor, what's his name? Bob something. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. Better Call Saul. I don't want to mispronounce his name. His name was Bob. Somebody has it. Oh, Odenkirk. Yeah, so Bob Odenkirk is an Amazon package deliverer. Apparently, that gig he got with Breaking Bad didn't really take him that far. He's won 2 Primetime Emmys, 3 Critical Choice Television Awards, 5 Golden Globes, actor, producer, comedian, and he delivers packages for Amazon. Although, I don't know. I mean, I've heard this and I've seen people talking about it, but I'm like, could this be researching a role? Could it be a clever marketing ploy? Like, is he really delivering packages? Better Call Saul star quits Amazon job looking for another non-acting gig. Oh, he quit that. Apparently, he was Better Call Saul forced to deliver packages for Amazon after acting roles dry up. Yeah. Nothing wrong with delivering packages for Amazon. I've heard some horror stories, though. Yeah, you're right about that, Lean Dion. It's mainly the poor that suffer when it comes to the gas prices. Well, I mean, it is a big deal. The reason why I'm not making a living off my art anymore are things that are out of my control. For example, when I used to sell art cards primarily to make a living, I had a quota. I would do 70 per week. And at one point, my average prices were, going up closer to $10 each. But then there were changes in the USPS, and the rigid sleeves that I use started classifying my letters as packages, as small parcels. And that tripled the expense for shipping these things out. Then eBay fees went up. And before you know it, I was no longer making enough profit per sale to actually do it for a living anymore. Same with Kindle. I had a pretty decent royalty stream where I was making my rent money with essentially a passive income. But I made a mistake. I got hired by a publishing company, and they said, hey, just transfer all of your books to us, and then we're going to pay you $3K a month to produce this amount of content. And as soon as I made the deal, they kind of disappeared on me. And when I finally got a hold of them, it was a couple. They had broken up, and the guy's girlfriend absconded with the company. So that some woman I never even met had been living off my royalties for like a year and a half. And I contacted it really took me a while to get to her. She sort of apologized. It doesn't make a difference now. Some of my books I don't promote because I was paid to write them, and other people make money off of them. So I blame myself for that. Let's see here, going through your comments. But yeah, Lean Dion says, I appreciate the optimism. It's only negative takes on at the moment on the state of things. I'll say OS prices, especially fuel, getting crazy. Right. Now, I got a question though. When people are complaining about their gas prices and their food bills, are they still shelling out money to other things like Netflix, like Amazon Prime, like HBO or Disney? Like, I wonder, people have their priorities, but that's what I would cut first. And that's another point, too. A strong point for what we're doing. People who leave the world stage, people who go deprogramming, who exit this thing, are no longer feeding their most valuable asset to it. And I'm not talking about turning it off. That's lazy. I'm talking about understanding it, seeing through it, not ignoring it, not becoming uninformed, but becoming informed, but in a responsive and non-reactive way. Because that's really what we're advocating here. But the more people that do that, the more people aren't feeding it. Now, what happens when that time and attention turns towards this third platform? Well, it becomes its own separate economy that doesn't need to abide by the rules of the mainstream and alternative duopoly. All these people who claim censorship, I would argue, are essentially exaggerating in line for clicks, because if you're acknowledged enough to be censored, you're acknowledged. You exist. You're an alternative. We don't exist. We are not acknowledged. This is not acknowledged. What we're doing does not exist in the world stage. So we're not even censored. We're just completely ignored. And the reason why they don't acknowledge it is because they know it's like watering a plant. They don't want to feed this beast. Yeah, there are effects. One of the things about COVIDs I realized is COVIDs was especially deleterious to the elderly and isolated. Like it precipitated a mental health crisis. It did, in fact, cut off contact, which is bad already, alienated people from one another. And it also enmeshed people and prolonged relationships that probably shouldn't have been prolonged. And these things are worth bringing up because the people who cling to the bloody guardrails are suggesting that we're like, oh well, nothing's wrong then, and so they can't go with it because they're used to this tension, their wokeness. I'm like, yeah, just redirect it. There's plenty to be mad about, and there's plenty of accountability that will be demanded from anybody attached to this, and write those things down. We need a list of grievances, like legitimate grievances, not fake woke left, woke right talking points, but I mean legitimate consequences aside from mind aids, from this colonization of the mind by this operating system designed to limit its reach, its perception. We've been put into a series of fictional universes. We've been put into a hyper reality. So the mind control thing is actually worse, if you ask me. The mind control is worse than the gas prices. Like, there used to be these people saying they're going to take our guns. Nobody really says that anymore, but that was like a major talking point for many years in Trutherville. And I was like, it doesn't matter if they take your guns; they've already taken your minds. But for me, the C-19 was a revelation. It was a big reveal, and it was also a shock. It was just like, okay, this system controls everybody's minds. There's no resistance. That's one thing it revealed to me. Another thing too is it vindicated us because we predicted 3/11 Ground Zero Seattle, a world-changing event, World War III. So we predicted it. So it was very vindicating from our perspective. But I think it also gave us this impetus to go ahead and further deconstruct the system itself, that made it even possible to push a button and turn everybody into extensions of Big Brother, to turn everybody into Agent Smiths. Like, the whole thing, the whole operation just showed how susceptible we are at any time. All they need to do is put out a certain narrative and everybody will march lockstep. And so it showed you too that there are no critical thinkers, because the thinking is all done within their non-critical assessment of the world stage itself. So it was a massive awakening. Without COVID, I don't think we would have seen the world stage. Metascript, the term metascript, I coined that for our use in 2020. And I did so because we were comparing, and a lot of you are here for this. We were starting to notice, why are so many elements of 2020 plucked right out of 1968? And so as we started noticing the 1968-2020 parallels, and there were many, it is ridiculous. We started to realize, okay, wait, they're recycling scripts. And then we started saying, if this is true, and if we are indeed living through staged media events that are using scripts, then what connects them? And then we started bringing, wait, all the fake events have predictive programming. All these fake events that we're all collectively experiencing, that I'm saying, have some kind of propaganda buildup outside of just the news. And so the more we're looking at this thing, and 1968 to 2020, we're like, well, if this is true, then 1969 should have some repeats in 2021. And so we were looking at these patterns and we were mind mapping them out. And that's when I coined the term metascript, because it became clear to me that these fake events aren't anomalies. These aren't just PR stunts that affect the present news cycle to steer it, but rather these are events on a timeline written long ago that are being performed for us with regularity, and that our future is pre-written, and that the events are manufactured to take us along that specific route. So without 9/11, without 2020, without the spate of mass shootings, the space fake, without these big events, I don't think we would have the insights that we do. And something else too. During the lockdowns, we started issuing press passes because I learned that media was essential. And I said, wait, why did these liars, these reinforcers of the system get to go out and we can't? So I started issuing press passes and I called them freedom tickets, and everyone was getting them so they could go report on their local hospitals. And if you remember at the time in 2020, we had a reporter from ABC News in Las Vegas who was snitching on people on Easter doing egg hunts outside. And he called us. At that time, I was calling news stations. I was calling news stations routinely. And I would ask them questions. Hey, what do you think about this eyewitness outside of Parkland who says she was with Nick Cruz? And I shared the link. So I was starting to engage with media at the time. At the time, we were more focused on media exposure to certain ideas. And that approach doesn't make sense now that I look at it, because what we had done was we had wrongfully assumed that conspiracy theorists, truthers, red pillars would be behind us. I didn't realize it was a bunch of backstabbing, competitive, alt media, egos competing for clicks, that none of them actually care about the truth. But look, that's, again, to our advantage. The fact that the people who are basically pretending to be anti-establishment are completely clueless about what tools they have become. But anyway, so to get back to this, another thing to consider too is stress. Emotional manipulation, psychological warfare, cognitive dissonance, systemic gaslighting, uh, all of these things combined with the agitprop create a very mentally unhealthy environment for the individual to exist. It's inner war. And this inner war is what keeps this machine going. They need half against half, left versus right, all the time on every issue. They're triangulated. There's a very specific dynamic, which I'll be describing in a whiteboard going along with the book. I have this graphic I made. It's like, you are here. And it just shows the world stage, the political horseshoe, the triangulation, and where you are based on your point of view. Because if you assume that everyone has the same point of view, that we're all operating in the same with the same set of facts, you would be wrong. There are two different interpretations that should be mutually exclusive, but they're not, because we're not an objective society. It's like that coexist bumper sticker. We have so many overlapping fictional universes that everybody's allowed to believe as long as you believe. The only people who aren't allowed are the people who choose to know. Again, Frank Herbert, Dune Messiah, they're trained to believe because belief can be manipulated, not to know because knowledge is dangerous. And dangerous to what? Well, what was dangerous about Truman finding out that he was being lied to? Well, that knowledge enabled him to escape his prison, to shut down the show. That's the basis of Gnosticism. Knowledge sets you free, not beliefs. So believers will say, oh, you'll be free if you just pick up my dusty scriptures and memorize them. No, that's not going to free you. It's not going to free your mind. It's going to glorify the idea that you shouldn't be free because you're a slave to a higher power. And the higher power is actually just a mask for government. You're not a free thinker and you're not open-minded with regard to the world stage and our manufactured history if your perspective is contained by their parameters. If your perspective is not inclusive of media fakery, news bending, history bending, predictive and concurrent programming, and a pattern of fakery going back 6 decades, then you're not open-minded. You don't have enough information to be making knowledge claims. We're living through an engineered philosophical crisis. The reason why normies can't just see through this stuff is because they have the wrong operating system, and it's by design. Again, the government gave them mind aids. Lean Dion says, I'm awaiting Dune 3 in December. It'll tie in with fake nukes, I'm guessing. Yeah, I will probably I'll binge watch 1 and 2 in preparation for that. I remember Dune had a lot of overlap with Kyle Rittenhouse, of all things. Also, I'm looking forward to this July, the new Christopher Nolan, The Odyssey, because we've seen a lot of subtext connecting the Odyssey and Poseidon and nukes. And of course, he did Fallout. Well, I mean, Oppenheimer, Jonathan Nolan did Fallout. So between Oppenheimer, Fallout, there's quite a lot of content there from directors known to be producing predictive programming content for fake world events. But you're right in that assessment. A movie of that size, as far as budget and reach and popularity, coming out in December means that don't expect there to be a nuke before the end of the year. That's the nature of predictive programming. I mean, 9/11 was a big one, many decades in the making. And there was a ton of predictive programming, but not all of it met the deadline. Some of it was, like, for example, Collateral Damage was supposed to come out in October. Billboards all over Ground Zero. Well, Collateral Damage had to be WTC 7'd. They had to pull it because it contained scenes that were reminiscent of 9/11. Same reason Francis Ford Coppola had to pull Megalopolis and wait 20 plus years to put it out because it was basically 9/11. Now, Collateral Damage was gutted, changed, and released a year later. But I'm just saying, you can find examples where the timing of the movie suggests that it was probably predictive or concurrent, but didn't make the release date. Oh, interesting. You should watch them movies. They have a Middle Eastern conflict inbuilt in the narrative. Yeah, exactly. I can't wait actually because I did watch most of one of them, but I've been reading these quotes by Frank Herbert, and I'm like, these are spot on, especially the one about they're programmed to believe. Autism says, I saw Laura Loomer was prophesying that we're going to have an event 10 times worse than 9/11. Yeah, she's been saying that for some time. Interestingly, she used to be the conspiracy theorist, but she's distanced herself from 9/11 truth and stuff. She's mainstream Republican, and they see ISIS as the main enemy. The woke right sees Israel as the main enemy. But she's been saying that for some time. And the thing is, she's got a desk in the Pentagon. She jumped on the stage when Julius Caesar in the park was portraying Trump as Caesar and had him getting assassinated. She jumped on the stage and stopped it. She called out predictive programming in the magazines, The Atlantic, leading up to the Trump head wound thing. Stuff we were talking about, Laura Loomer was getting into. My point of it is, she's an insider. She's a programmer, she's an insider. And if she says, then she has some kind of inkling about what's to come, not based on her geopolitical analysis, but because she's a script reading crisis actor. I don't know if their beefs are real. You know, because she was going to burn a Quran on stage, and she was talking to Milo Yiannopoulos, and he records people, and he has blackmail content on them. Now, I don't know how much of this is authentic or if it's staged, but she decided she was going to start wearing a Jewish star and play up being Jewish, which I don't think she actually is. And then she was going to burn a Quran. Sounds to me like she's just an agent provocateur. Well, anyway, apparently she got a pentagram. And Milo had to explain to her, no, the Jewish star has 6 points. You have the satanic star that has 5 points. Portal says Mad Max on VHS loop in the studio. Yeah, there's some Mad Max. So Mad Max, Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson's a very interesting meta scripter. He's done 9/11 predictive programming in The Patriot, which I've talked about a lot. I also think he directed the Butler shooting and January 6th. If I had to attach a specific director to those events, I would say he would have been one of the main go-tos. They've also done there's a lot of Christ stuff with him, even before Passion of the Christ. In Mad Max, there's one of the more iconic scenes where he's walking across the desert with a pole across his back, like carrying a cross. And at each end are gas cans, and he's got the gas they need so they can complete the mission and save the world. So it's kind of this like Christ saving the world, but instead of his blood, it was the gasoline. The new Mad Max is really good, Furiosa. And I think the character Immortan Joe is I don't know, I find him kind of endearing. And they do this thing. What do they call them? His army, where when they want to martyr themselves, they spray paint their faces with the silver paint, and then they scream out, "Witness me," and they do their final act, and then it's rated. It's rated by Immortan Joe or others as what they say is mediocre. If their final act of suicidal destruction is not that spectacular, it's mediocre. I don't think 9/11 was mediocre. I think Muhammad Atta created quite the spectacle. Well, whoever, I mean, Stanley, honestly, who directed 9/11? If you ask me, it was a consortium of directors, metascriptors. I would say probably James Cameron and Stanley Kubrick. That would be my guess. Joe from Kinetic says mainstream Republicans took on the conspiracy roles. It's pretty annoying now. Yeah, that is true. Mainstream Republicans are annoying as hell. But see, they go with some conspiracies, but they are 100% avoidant of anything that blames Israel. So, like Alex Jones, for example, you wouldn't think of him as woke right on Team Nick Fuentes, but that's because he euphemizes it. He says globalists, George Soros. Well, who does he really mean? Oh, that's right. New Resurrection movie out soon. So, Passion of the Christ, Resurrection of the Christ is next. There's a lot I could say about these movies. I mean, Passion of the Christ, Jim Caviezel, later huge with Q, watched Sound of Freedom at Bedminster next to Trump. He was 33 during Passion of the Christ. He died during the filming of the Sermon of the Mount when lightning struck him. If you believe him, which I'm like, where's the video? It's like the same people who think that Jim Caviezel, dressed as Jesus, got struck by lightning and killed on set. The same people who believe that also believe that Tucker Carlson was scratched by demons in his bed. It's like, don't you people need evidence? And I think there's 2 movies, and they're 40 days apart. I have to fact check that, but I think that's the case. But again, Mel Gibson is a major league meta scripter. If you remember, he got pulled over drunk and he ranted about Israel. I would say that was staged. And then he had the movie Conspiracy Theorist. So he's always been used, I think, strategically to target, demo the right with certain psyops. Like, for example, Wicked and Wicked Part 2, Wicked for Good, are clearly aimed at leftist audiences. And the subtext is the witch represents Antifa, the talking animals are the immigrants, and the Wizard of Oz is Donald Trump, who's deporting the talking animals, and the witch is defending them. Renee Good, Wicked for Good. It's all there. So the same people who saw Renee Good as a martyr and were anti-ICE were primed with these movies. Similarly, the content created by Mel Gibson, I think, in a lot of ways, is meant to reach the same audiences who are targeted with right-wing psyops like Butler, Pennsylvania, or January 6th. And when I say January 6th, I just think of Braveheart and the scene in Braveheart, the mobs of soldiers with swords and flags attacking the other side, the big collisions. They kind of recreated that. And then Butler had Braveheart all over it. We've gone into this stuff extensively. Lean Dion says, IPS is untouchable. Well, we are standing on a solid foundation. We're not conspiracy theorists here. We're media analysts. And we've seen through the duopoly. And the people in it can't see through it because they're in it. And they think they're awake because they've been told they're awake. They're given little badges, little woke badges. Like, I'm awake. I took the red pill. I hit the Q pipe. It's a fascinating process of indoctrinating people into alt media because they're given the illusion of being insightful and having discrimination when they have really devolved, especially recently. There are no legitimate searches for truth or any attempts to expose anything. It's all just competition for clicks today. I think the dismal state of Trutherville works to our advantage because they're not criticized enough and they ignore the criticism from the mainstream. They're not criticized from within. So they exist in this false sense of security and complacency because they haven't been challenged effectively where it counts by somebody with inside knowledge, someone who, I mean, our think tank has the media critics, the ones who call media fake. We've always been fringed by mainstream truthers. They never liked what we've had to say. They've always outgrouped us. I remember Paul Joseph Watson, working for Alex Jones. He's like, any auto hoaxers in the chat, get out of here. You can't call stuff fake until you've given the family time to grieve. It's like, wait, why are you starting with the presumption that these people aren't faking it? Yes, Lean Dion, he's the conspiracist that did the conspiracy movie. Yeah, they started using the term conspiracist instead of conspiracy theorist because theorist makes you sound smart. But if you say conspiracist, it adds in because they've tried to associate racism with it. Shadowban says, seeing if I'm shadow banned. Lean Dion says, Trump said Braveheart was his favorite movie at one point. Yeah, so if you're not familiar with this, Trump's avatar for Truth Social is the Braveheart face. He posed for a photo with his fist raised, fight, fight, fight. That photo taken by the guy who also photographed or videoed George W. Bush dodging the shoe. That scene, fist raised, flag behind him, the flagpole there, it aligns perfectly with the Braveheart movie poster. Trump goes back to Butler 84 days later He's on the cover of the New York Post, and they called him Braveheart. And I still think they should have they should have consulted me. They should have said, oh yeah, Thomas Crooks was a flat earther. They're saying he's a furry, but like they should have said he's a flat earther. And he would have actually hit his mark if he had accounted for the rotation of the earth. But being an ignorant flat earther, he didn't consider that the earth would move his target out of the path of his bullet, like all snipers know. Anufel says, Tim, do you think we're having a Seattle, Washington this year? You know, the stage has been set, especially last year with Final Destination. And here's something to consider, because there are people like, oh, if it doesn't happen this year, I don't care. Because they want it to happen already. They want to get it over with. It's like Drastic Liars has been picking up on predictive programming for 6/11, Seattle getting nuked for a long time. But he says he can't predict the year. Well, that's the nature of this. Again, if we're talking about history written 100 plus years in advance, they're not going to change it because we've noticed something. So what I'm thinking here is that imagine if it was 1994 and you started picking up on predictive programming. Oh, crap, the Twin Towers are going to get it. Look at this movie. Look at this. Look what they're saying. Why do they keep associating these symbols? What's going to happen with New York? Get out of New York on 9/11. You could have been saying that for years if you had been aware of the way the programming mirrors the fake events, precedes the fake events. And it's another important point here. Predictive programming only correlates to fake events. Nobody's dying in psyops. If you think people are dying in psyops, you're way behind. So now, do I think it's going to be this year? Well, you know what? For this thing to work, according to the script, it does have to occur while Trump is in office. And we have many examples of this. And in fact, Butler, Butler, he was shot at 6:11 p.m. and 33 seconds. And 84 days later, August 4th, they had a moment of silence at 6:11. And they had some guy sing Ave Maria, which is what the Riddler was singing in the Batman movie when Batman said, "What did you do?" And if you haven't seen that Batman movie, that's when the dams get blown up and Gotham gets flooded. So Gotham's underwater on Wednesday, November the 6th, which is an 11/6. An 11/6, 6/11, like 11/3 and 3/11 are consistently correlated. That's why 3/11 was predictable for us, because we were expecting it to be on 11/3. My point is, they've laid the groundwork. Yeah, the 6/11 head wound was Butler. Yeah, so there's a lot of like 6/11 and even like a lot of 1/16 we could point to that connect to very specific key events. Like even Oppenheimer I mentioned. I mean, look, Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan, Fallout, Jonathan Nolan. Fallout had the Trump headwind predictive programming we called out in April. Oppenheimer, which in both these movies, the series and the movie have the 33 code in it as well. But the Oppenheimer movie was filmed on IMAX film. The film itself weighed 600 pounds and is 11 miles long, so 11/6. Oppenheimer's wearing a badge that says K6, 11/6. And 6/11 is an inverted 9/11. And my take on it from the beginning is that 9/11 represented the external threat, the invasion from outside. 6/11 will be domestic. And the predictive programming buildup for the 9/11ing of Seattle has consistently pointed at a domestic source. And there's quite a lot there. I mean, I could go into, even the date that the Space Needle became a historic monument was 4/19/1999. Like 4/19, Waco Day, the day that Timothy McVeigh got radicalized. 4/19, Oklahoma City bombing. And the Space Needle has a great deal of significance, so as much as the Twin Towers did and the One World Trade Tower. But even though Jurassic Liars and I have completely different interpretations on what the information means, we're looking at a lot of the same data. And that's what's important. I don't really agree with any of his conclusions, but I'm not a religious person. In his view, I'm probably going to hell. And I'm cool with that. I don't care. I literally do not care. Like, I don't care to appease somebody's religious convictions. Like, I'm not trying to meet halfway, because I don't think that what's coming is going to be real. I'm not saying get out of Seattle. I'm saying get your smartphone out, set up a 24/7 webcam nearby. You know what's strange is we were expecting the Space Needle to get nuked or to get blasted on November the 3rd, 2019. Didn't happen, but on 3/11/2020, Seattle was ground zero. But regardless, there were 3,000 people watching the Space Needle that day, because that's how much we had talked about it. And so here we are, waiting for the Space Needle to burn, and people are like, has the Space Needle gone down yet? And then national news in Turkey, a Space Needle burned. It was like this observatory. I was like, what the hell does that mean? Can someone explain that to us? But like I said, these are interchangeable. You have that band from Japan called World Order, and their song "Let's Start World War III" insinuates Trump getting shot. And it has this yellow brick road in Seattle, which is Oz. Okay, Seattle is Oz. So let me point this out really quick. 11/3, Seattle, all the predictive programming. The One World Trade Tower opens up on 11/3, which was Dick Cheney's death date, by the way. So there's a lot of interesting connections there with 11/3 and this Space Needle predictive stuff. It's like, wait, what's going on here? Because when Wicked came out, the first screening was on 11/3, and Wicked Part 1 ends when the Wicked Witch EMPs the Emerald City. Seattle's called the Emerald City. EMP. It's the blackout that happens when the nuke goes off at high altitude. It's the power outage. So the first part ends when the witch nukes Seattle. And again, Trump is the Wizard of Oz. And part 2 is really about Trump and ICE versus Antifa. And Green, the Green Witch, like the green-haired Joker, has been consistently correlated with this. So the system is going to be taken out. The next Timothy McVeigh might actually be a far leftist. I had been expecting a white nationalist, like like the base, a white nationalist group that has apparently paramilitary training and has planned attacks on our electrical grids. Well, you know what the base, so the base is called, or the base is the white nationalist terrorist group that have associated with the 6/11 narrative. But Al Qaeda, 9/11, what does Al Qaeda mean? The base. But it could very well be sort of one of these things where it's a little bit blamable on both. Like, look at Tyler Robinson. Look at Charlie Kirk. Who killed Kirk? If you ask the left, one of their guys did, Antifa, and they cheered over it. If you ask the right, it wasn't that guy. It was Israel. Or if you ask some people on the left, they'll say, oh, no, actually, it was a Groyper. He was one of Nick Fuentes' guys. So it becomes a whodunit. As long as you agree that it happened, they win. They want you to fight over who did it. And that's typical. It doesn't have to be solved. So it might come out that when Seattle gets it, it'll be done by domestic terrorists. It's just a question of, were they far right or far left? But then there's another element too, where the political horseshoe comes into play, where there's a point where the extremes tend to resemble one another and they have common interests. And the far left and far right might actually both be equally culpable in this. They both have beef with the system, with Trump. Anufel says, if it happens this year, could it be June 11th or November 6th? See, November 6th would be an interesting one that nobody really hasn't really shown up. But 6/11 has been super consistent. You know where Trump was on 6/11 last year? He was in the Kennedy Center. Think Kennedy head wound. And he was posing in front of the Kennedy bust. But again, the code to me, 6/11, 11/6, 9/11, yeah, it refers to a major transformative psyop. But the buildup for the Seattle event is actually in the aggregate now bigger than the buildup for 9/11. So Lauren Loomer might have a point. Lauren Loomer might actually have a point here, about 10 times worse, which means 30,000 people. Could they fake 30,000 people dying? Well, yeah, easy. The stage has been set, though, as far as I'm concerned. It's fait accompli. It's just a question of when. And I'm not really big on predicting dates, although we have to acknowledge the patterns that are there and what seems to be indicated. Again, never forget that Sunday, March 15th, 2020, our live stream was called World War III Starts in Seattle on Wednesday. How did we know? Joe says, we'll definitely notice this once it does happen. Look how long you were talking about Trump's ear wound the day it happened. I was like, wow, they got this one right. Yeah, leading up to it, starting from 2022 to 2024, we had pointed out the 47 on the side of his head. This is all tying into this incoming event. And the one in Fallout, the blood on the right side of the head, that to me really settled it. And that was in April. We've got it nailed down with Butler and Charlie Kirk. We have evidence of concurrent and predictive programming and staged historic events that are a combination of government and entertainment that are done with regularity. Like, it's case closed. We've already made our case. But the next thing is, again, making it clearer and transmissible and unavoidable, unignorable, so that the largely ignorant population regarding this specific issue will have to confront it and then reveal something about themselves and how they respond to it. Are you going to respond to the truth by saying, it's not on the Black Mirror, so I don't trust it? It's not mainstream, so I don't trust it. It's not mainstream alternative, so I don't trust it. You're going to see who has outsourced their thinking. You're going to see those who lack intellectual independence. And you're also going to see a lot of cowardice and pandering, which I think, again, we can, when we get there, you'll see. We'll burn that bridge after we cross it. But that's another reason that we talk about these things, is what we're trying to do is understand the metascript, the world stage, how it operates, and the program itself. And merely talking about the program and referencing the stuff is demonstrating that what we're proposing here is that we have a better model for understanding what media is. And like any valid model, it has predictive capability that we predict trends or specific events. We're going to, I actually think channel predictive history and other channels I could name, which I don't. I think there are channels out there that are planted to try to co-opt this mental space. So there's an area of discourse of people who are starting to perceive some kind of order in the fog. It's like they're getting too much signal, got to add more noise. So they put out these individuals who will attract those who are thinking along the wrong lines. And then they misdirect them. And Newful says, so auto hoax or witch hunt? No, they won't hunt us. It's to our advantage that we don't exist in their worldview. We're the ones on the offensive. And the fun is going to be in watching their defense, watching the fireworks, because they don't have a defense. There is no refutation. And they're too underinformed. They're stuck in their Truman Show boxes. They're so compartmentalized and arrogant, like arrogantly attached to the presumption that they have the facts, that they are right, that they won't even look down to consider what we're saying. It's very Kafka-esque. If you're trying to gain a validation from the worldsters, because they do not hear you. They will gaslight you. It's systemic. But we don't need them. But their reaction will amplify our signal. And their reaction is something they won't be able to control. That's what I mean when I say it's to our advantage that they remain in a state of unawareness about this, because the less they know, the more they're going to react. And their reactions will be ridicule and then hostility. But whatever it is, the more noise they generate, the more the signal reaches those who are prepared to receive it. And I'm suggesting we only need a good solid 10,000. Once we have that core, this will be a self-aware demographic that you won't be able to get rid of. And I could put it in a wider historic context. I think there's a place where this fits. Not that this is supposed to exist, but I think we can see how far it goes. And again, I invite doubters to doubt. I invite skeptics. I don't care about the incredulous. I don't care about your low information dismissiveness, your low info disbelief. I'm interested in critical analysis. Tell us that we're wrong. Tell us to trust the black mirror. Tell us to kowtow before the black box TV set and its pundits if you think that's the right thing to do. But, come at us with facts and skepticism, not mere incredulity coming from a false sense of intellectual high ground and moral high ground. Like, how dare you call the stuff fake? Well, how dare you propagate agitprop designed to put people into a state of turmoil and chaos? How dare you join the other side? Is ignorance an excuse anymore? And I'm saying it's not. And we're going to make this very clear in the coming days. And it's like, again, it's going to be very obvious who the paid agents are and who the comfortable are, who are just pandering. Because I think it's indefensible. I think it's unconscionable to be defending the system. And when people are made aware of what they're defending, they might think it's innocuous. Oh, no, I just believe in this and this and that. Well, yeah, sure. Maybe you think that's okay. Maybe it is because, we live in this subjective world that encourages solipsism. But if you don't consider the moral implications of not resisting or countering or revolting against mass mind control, then what does that say about you? If you have a big platform and you don't lend it to the cause of shining a light in this very dark space, if you use it instead to enrich yourself by working the alternative side of this big circus, then what does that say? Because we're not doing this for money. We're doing this because we are intellectually independent. We're thinkers. This is a philosophical revolt. There's no money in it from the world stage. It's not like, they're going to pay us. There's going to be a platform for this. No, there isn't. That's not the expectation. And the beauty of it is that this doesn't require any. This doesn't need a massive operational budget because we've already done the work. It just needs to be introduced. Lean Dion says Benny Johnson is the worst. Yeah, I screen capped that guy doing the soy jack face pointing at the rocket. He is the worst. But he's not real. None of these guys are real. These fake Christian conservatives, they're not Christian, they're not conservative, they're plants, they're provocateurs, they're actors, they have fake families, fake kids, fake wives, and they're all inherently compromised. And I think that's part of their program where, you know, they get the fame, the money, the comfort, but should they get out of line, information could drop that will destroy them in their eyes of their followers and make them look like hypocrites, because they're all hypocrites. Matt Walsh, Benny Johnson, these people are terrible. Nick Fuentes, they're all sellouts. They know they're sellouts too. They're not just like strongly opinionated people who've been put there because of the conviction they have. No, they're propagandists. They're all towing party lines, and they're all actually following scripts. And they're psyop reinforcers. These are the ones who reinforce the essential reality of every fake event. I think, didn't Benny Johnson speak at the Charlie Kirk Memorial when it became Kirkianity? But yeah, no, he's terrible. They all are. You know, Laura Loomer is also very terrible. Candace Owens, terrible. These are terrible people, objectively speaking. Like, you can play a villain in a movie and not be a bad person because you're in a movie. But if you're playing a role on the world stage, you know, villains to some, heroes to others, but if you're portraying it in real life, you don't get to be treated as just like an artist or an actor because you're a propagandist. It's a whole other level. Anonymous says fittest flat earther is a fake Christian too. Oh yeah, that guy's a disinformation agent. He said that, oh yeah, Prince is still alive and he wears 9-inch stilts and he doubles as Bad Bunny or something like that. And the evidence, 2 pictures side by side. I knew he was trouble the first time I saw him. The finger wagging, the smug face, the low information claims. I was like, okay, this guy's promoted. Why is he being promoted so heavily? He's wearing a cross. I knew he was a plant from day one. And, you know, he threatened to kill Jake the a-hole. And I'm like, please call I almost want to report the guy to the FBI myself. I should go to ic3.org and report him for his death threat. And why? Because I want to know what's on that guy's laptop. Because in my experience, the shills that are promoted in the flat earth community are pretty much all SOs. What's his name? ODD I just saw like the 5th or 6th mugshot from that guy. Witsit gets it. You can make trading cards off of these guys' mugshots. He's got so many of them. Witsit spits it, we called him. You don't want to know why. But no. Oh yeah, ODD Okay, so I saw his mugshot because not the sex offender thing he did when he was a teen, but it was something else. Oh, that's right. He got into meth dealing, Breaking Bad, because YouTube wasn't paying the bills. And then apparently he took another plunge. He went and robbed a bank in Denver. Guy's got, or he's missing something. So what would drive this person to commit these types of acts? And then you have Nathan Thompson, another one, you know, Christian. And these people are all, I'm a Christian. Nathan Thompson wears a cross on his forehead. And they look down on us because I'm not a Christian. I'm not religious. And so I'm supposed to think these people are on a higher tier. Well, so Nathan Thompson is debating the flat earth on some show. And they cut to his screen And apparently a homemade X-rated movie on his computer while doing a live flat earth debate. And you know what was weird was a few years ago, he was bragging about 8 shower heads in the shower at the house he was staying. He was living at the house of the guy who was taking care of George W. Bush in his old age. Like, weirdly connected to Skull and Bones Society, if you ask me. Oh, there are so many ridiculous stories we could tell you. And those are just, in fact, there's a rogues gallery of nasties. All these people associated with the Flat Earth Conference are feds and peds, criminals, all of them. I'm surprised there aren't any murderers among them, but we don't know that for sure. There's death fakers. I don't know. I mean, Anonymous says, what's with all the ex-con truther shills? Oh, yeah, like, what's his name? Everyone was like, oh, you got to get on the guy's show. His name is Archaics or something like that. I think that's his name. So I look him up, and no, he and some other guy did a horrible thing to some woman. And they had knives, and I'm like, okay, this guy's a psychopath who spent like 30 years in prison, and now he's got a huge account, and he's talking about simulation theory. And then people defend him. I'm like, I'm sorry, but that says something about your character. And you could say, oh, it's in the past. I don't know. You know, these days, I'm not inclined to be so forgiving when it comes to inhumane acts and deeds. I think that some people are just dark souls. Exactly, Joe from Connecticut. All these people seem to be SOs, so that's done on purpose to discredit them. Yeah, that's exactly my point. Because one of the predator, look, okay, a predator walking the streets. We're talking somebody who shouldn't be on the streets, a known convicted predator, was actually speaking at the Flat Earth Conference. Unbeknownst to us, this guy was a predator. Now, I knew, I even have a mind map. I put him on my map. I had intuitions about that guy months before we found out, before the court records came out, because I can know things about people sometimes. It's little subtle things, and I'm usually, I'm not gonna say always right, because I'm not always making these judgments, but I do get info from about people, just like arrives in my hands at my desk. So this guy had no business putting himself in front of this, and then he ends up speaking to the Daily Beast and giving them some certain talking points to be used against us. Anonymous says, even Jaren sends ooh to random chicks. That's like an e-flasher. Is that how they do it now? Flashers? They went online. People who expose, that should be a misdemeanor at a minimum. Indecent exposure. I mean, it doesn't count if it's online. I mean, unless they request it. But I don't imagine anyone requesting, hey, Jaronism, would you go ahead and kindly send me a. And, you know, he often talks about it because he was trying to get. We don't even want to talk about what he was trying to get Jay Gibson to do with him to prove who was a bigger man. It's just, these people are all sickos. And they're all associated with sickos. They're all psychopaths. Prove me wrong. Okay, Mark Sargent seems to be pretty clean. Although, that's what you could say about any of these individuals when they show their good faces. So I don't know. I'm not saying Mark Sargent's a serial killer. I don't know. Are there any serial killers active in that part of the country right now? I thought he was a cop the whole time, like a handler for all these, because we have seen that. One of the individuals who was sort of a nexus, like you had this individual who was the hub for Denver flat earthers. So all the SOs and all the convicts answered to this guy. And one day he and I are getting this conversation, and it was a private, because I called him and I was pretty mad because he had mocked a friend of ours who had died. And I called him up because I had his number because he gave it to me when I went and visited him in Denver. We were on speaking terms a little bit. Well, anyway, I called him up and I said, I heard what you said about, Mike, what's your problem with this? I mean, isn't that sick? You're a Christian, etc. And he told me that he worked in Denver police and that he knows people in high places. So he had more or less insinuated something. But when he told me he did intelligence for Denver police, when I accused him of being a Fed, he said, I'm not a Fed. I just do intelligence for Denver police. I'm like, wait, why is the face of this major Netflix flat earther documentary and handler of all these weird sex offenders and criminals also working directly for the Denver police intel? How does that make sense? Ledia says, I think Mark is the worst. He's a cop. Yeah, Mark is another one who also never apologized for laughing at Mad Mike's death. That was pretty messed up. A lot of these people are heartless, but, I don't know. I think you're right. I think the guy's a cop. I think some of these people are handlers because he's the one who told me you got to get a hold of Wes Stacy or Wesley Stace. And there's a horror story there as well. Do you remember that guy exposed his browser history? And it's like hunting knives. Next search, little girls. Next search. It's like, what the hell is this guy into? And then you find out, oh man, it's just so sick. He was friends with the other guy. Behind the Perv. We should do an updated edition of Behind the Perv and just do an expose on all the mugshots and criminality surrounding these conspiracy subculture groups. Jimbo Khan says the legend Pete Shea called it out from the beginning. Yeah, I've seen Pete Shea in my comments recently. I'll have to see if I can get him to call in one of these days. He can talk about the ostrich or whatever it is he's obsessed with. Interesting guy regardless. He's a musician. All right, well, my phone battery's going to die here shortly. We're not going to be live with Fakeologist at 6, but I will probably be live at 6. I'll send out a live stream notification. I'm going to see what kind of projects I can get done. It's a long weekend, and I got out of work early. Let's see what else I have here in the comments before we go. All right, yeah, we've been here over 2 hours. Appreciate all your comments and your feedback and your participation, because this is the beginning of, I think, the most important phase of the IPS's existence. I also want to say thanks to those of you who ordered the hats. Those are going out. And, I'm considering a few things, which I'll detail in the newsletter. I'm going to prioritize over the next coming weeks. That's right, the dodo bird, not the ostrich. He's obsessed with dodo birds. And I think he said dodo. Oh, God, I don't want to go down that particular rabbit hole. But I'm sure it makes sense. I'll have to ask AI to analyze some of his conjecture. When we get the phone calls back on, it's going to be great because I use AI to give a synopsis of the podcast and transcripts and to do quotes from the different callers. And I don't know, I foresee the future phone calls being extremely interesting because we're going into some new territory. We've been getting into places here. We've been getting in position, and we haven't been like overtly on the offensive. And so no one's going to see it coming. Like they didn't see it the first wave when we started the chat raids in 2017. All right, we'll see you all in the Discord server. Go to ips.monster if you want to link to the IPS hats, which you'll see on my future videos.